to Corporate Cafecito, a podcast based on professional development, career growth, and respecting our cultural identity. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Corporate Cafecito. Yo soy Nayeli Suarez-Gas, and today I am having Cafecito with Rey González. And if you have heard of El Valor or you're from Chicago, you probably know his name. But I will let you tell us a little bit about yourself, Rey.
Hi, everybody, and it's a pleasure being here today.
I love that you're here. Thank you.
It's a really honor for me, and it's first time. I'm not used to, being seen on any kind of screens, but it's an opportunity for us for me in particular, to share about El Valor, which I think is a great organization. But you want to know a little bit about me? I was born and raised in South Chicago. My parents and all our families worked in the steel mills. We went to Catholic schools, but unfortunately, when I wanted to go to the school, the counselor said, "You don't go to college, you can go to the steel mills." So I was in the steel mills for 7 years and went through a machinist apprenticeship. Went to school at night and got a degree, and once I graduated, I quit the steel mills, and I ended up working for the Chicago Urban League and getting women and minorities into building construction trades. And it kind of led me on the path that I am today, And then from there, I went to the National Council of La Raza and worked there for several years, and I was hired by ComEd, and that started my corporate career.
I love that story. So I'm gonna Rey and I have talked before. Is that no one that comes on this show is not someone I haven't talked to, so which I love because I think it's about the network and the community that we build. And Rey, you started at the steel mills, but that wasn't what you wanted to do.
Yeah, you're right. I had dreams as a young man. Certainly those dreams were not in any way fostered by the schools that I went to or the counselors that I went to. I think a lot of us went through that back in the 70s, especially as Mexicanos going into these schools, all white schools. And one of the things I was told is when I asked about going to college, they said, you don't go to college, you go to the mills. So always in my mind is I was going to show them. So I was able to go to school at night, and it was shift work, and I would trade with people so that I wouldn't have to work afternoons. So I went to school at night, and I worked days, and I worked not the midnight shift. Mm-hmm. And it took me about 6 or 7 years to graduate from college with a degree in business. And that's how eventually I got into ComEd. I got my college degree. And they were looking for somebody who knew a little bit about the community, and I was very fortunate to get hired as an HR rep for ComEd.
I think back to my experience in graduating high school, and so, I was like almost 20 years later, similar thing where I didn't know how to really apply for colleges. I got a letter from UIC saying, "Hey, we'll give you a scholarship if you come here based on your ACT." And my ACT score was a 21, but for Hispanic women in the Chicago area, I was 4 points above the average. And so they said, if you come here, we'll give you a scholarship. It wasn't a full scholarship, but the rest I'm like, I could work nights. I worked the night shift at a blood bank to make up for it. One of the things that we've discussed a lot is even though we're seeing generations, we're still seeing people going through that now.
That's correct.
So, part of our goal here is to shortcut and help people skip those steps and get that education and find their professional happiness. You went to ComEd and you started there, but then you didn't stay there for...
No, I moved from, I was there for about 17, 18 mm-hmm. years, and I had gone through a period of about 5 years where I seen other people were getting promoted. I was bypassed for opportunities. In the interim, during those time, I got a master's degree. I had a lot of experience, both inside and outside the company, and it was always something I didn't have. And so I decided to look for another job. I was in the same job for 5 years. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of preparing myself. And the one thing that I did do is I was always involved in the community. So it helped with some of my leadership skills because I'd serve on boards, was president of different boards, meeting different people. So I was able to kind of network with individuals. But I got a headhunter called me for a position at McDonald's Corporation. And I got hired as a director of diversity, and eventually, I think 13 months later, I was the vice president of diversity, one of the vice presidents of diversity. And it was a whirlwind. And, I had never thought that I would be a vice president for a company like
Yeah,
McDonald's,
for like
which
a
is a
Fortune
phenomenal.
100, yeah.
Exactly. And the opportunities that I got from McDonald's were just phenomenal. And not only just for me, but also for my family.
And I think a lot of times, when you have been somewhere, we would tend to say like, no, don't rock the boat. I quédate, ahí estás bien. So I love that a headhunter called you and said like, no, you can become a director because you had been passed up at ComEd and then, weren't getting that, even though you had the preparation, you had the wherewithal to be able to do it, but that you just were getting passed up. And sometimes, as scary as it may be, like our next step has to be out the door
Yeah.
to go find it somewhere else.
So one of the things, we didn't have employee network groups when I
Right.
was there, and I helped start the Latino Hispanic group. I was picked to work on a diversity initiative at the company, and there was an executive vice president who was kind of running the program. And then they decided to create a diversity initiative and have someone work that position. And so he strongly suggested that I apply for the position. He thought I'd be the best person for the job. I did apply. I was interviewed, and I didn't get the job. And it was somebody who came in from the outside with no corporate experience, and that person got the job. And
That
so,
you would probably have to train.
well, I didn't give him enough time to because after that happened, that's when I started looking for another position, and I was lucky to get a position at McDonald's and get that very same position. And interestingly enough, ComEd kept coming back at me and said, "Hey, we're kind of sorry, and we think we really need you. Would you like to come back?" And for several years, they came back looking to see if I'd be interested in the position. And after 4 years of meeting with them and they were trying to always set up a meeting to come back. After 4 years of those efforts, I ended up going, ComEd became excellent, and I went back to be their vice president of diversity.
Nice.
And I eventually retired from ComEd after about another 11 years. So.
I love that. But you don't retire. You
No.
don't know how to sit still.
No, I don't.
Two things. One, because I don't want to pass up. Tell us about your kids and the schools they went to.
That's interesting. I was just going to say that we said, what you and I went through in different generations. My youngest of 3 sons, he's an attorney today, and he had the same experiences that we had. And he was told, and I always told my kids, if you get straight A's, you can go to any school you want.
Yeah.
One, I would make it happen, but 2, they would be able to, they would be able to go to those schools. They'd be eligible to go to any school they wanted. And he said, well, I want to go to Harvard, and I want to go to Cornell. And we had all those, we went to those visits. And when he came back home and he applied for these schools, they told him not to apply for them, that it cost too much money and that your parents couldn't afford it. And he came home, and by then I was a vice president at McDonald's, and I kind of had a fit. I went to the school, and I think that guy had a really bad day that day
Stop saying that to our kids.
Yes. So my kids ended up going to the University of Michigan and doing very well and stuff in life. But you can never let your guard down, unfortunately, and that's what I've been with Valor for 43 years. It was an opportunity to use the skill sets and I guess what I knew and how I could help. And I guess mostly is that deep inside of me, the ganas to help our community.
Yeah.
And so I was always on that path. I was probably the last person to be that person. I was extremely shy, still am. My wife says I'm not shy, but I am very shy. But I was forced into it, and I
Yeah.
always tell this story. We went to an all-white school in the 70s, in the 60s. I'm sorry, we went all the no, it was all the way back to the 50s. We were an all-white school, and my brother was beat up all the time. He wouldn't fight, I would fight, and I just always had this notion in my head I was going to defend myself and my family, and I've had to do that my whole life. And I do that for my community as best I can.
I was gonna say, yeah, now you fight for those who can't fight for themselves, or those who need help, or those who don't know how to find that help.
Yeah. And so back in the 50s, my grandmother had a child with disabilities, and people say, why are you with El Valor for 43 years? She had a son with disabilities, and they had him institutionalized. And it was the worst thing that ever happened to her in her life. And she went to her grave with what she did. And when I walked in the doors of El Valor, I knew I belonged. So I'm still there today, and we're fighting for individuals with disabilities, but in particular with a focus on the Hispanic community.
So tell me what El Valor is.
El Valor is a nonprofit that serves children and adults with disabilities. We have like the largest, I think, early childhood program in the state and probably in the Midwest. We serve 3,000 children every year, birth to 5. We also have an adult program with 1,000 adults. And we provide different kinds of services, like we have housing. So we have 50 individuals in houses that are El Valor. We have a workshop where when I went there, I wasn't very happy with what we had, but right now we've got a variety of services from everything. We take them to Camp Confidence up in Minnesota. It's the first time many of them ever go to camp. All of them have access to computers, and we get computer classes, music classes, food. They learn how to cook. They learn how to live on their own. That we have supportive employment. We have respite programs. We have our own team for Special Olympics, and so we have about 30 individuals who are part of the Special Olympics.
It's amazing.
Yeah, so and again, it's mostly Latinos and others of color, and they wouldn't have these opportunities if it wasn't for El Valor. And we're very close to the parents for both the children and the adults. We have strong partnerships with those parents, and they're part of our decision making. They're on our boards. And we try to help them with their needs, but also they help us with what we need to do better.
When you go to El Valor, like, what are some things, like, how can our community get behind you?
We're always trying, one, to raise money, and if you see something about El Valor, we have an annual dinner, we have an annual golf outing, we have an annual tequila tasting. It's very
Puro
affordable.
party.
Yeah. But we every day we're asking people for money. That's partly what I do. We try with corporations. We try with individuals. We don't have the networks, at least, and that'd be my fault. We need better networks and meeting with individuals who have a passion for our mission. So we serve the poorest of the poor. Many of our families come to us with what they have on their back. So one of the things we're always trying to get from folks, or they donate, is socks for our kids from birth to 5. And everybody says, how do you know they need socks? And they take naps, and we can see in the wintertime that they don't have socks.
Yeah.
And so it's socks and underwear and coats and scarves and gloves and hats. We have a lot of great corporations that help us with that, and individuals, volunteer groups from different organizations that help us with that. And that's an ongoing thing. I think this weekend we're having Latinos with the biker Latinos, and they're going to bring us school supplies. One of our centers. The needs that we have are just about what every family needs who have children who are going to school, or you're just raising your child. My adults, they, with disabilities, we buy them new coats, and they'll probably lose them in a month. They put their coat down, and they don't remember where they put their coat. So we got to get them a new coat. It's anybody who understands. We have a lot of our. We have 50 individuals who live with us 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. They need things constantly, and so people bring. The other thing too is like Christmas and Thanksgiving. people adopt the house and help us with the meals and things like that. The other thing that we do that's with the adults is we let them celebrate, so we have, we have Christmas or, because they love Christmas, and we're not going to deny them that.
Everybody loves Christmas.
We have the Christmas parties, and that's huge with music, and they want to dance, they want to get dressed up. We have a prom.
Oh, nice.
And so people, donate their daughters' gowns and things, and so they go to prom every year. It's every year that they get to go to prom, and they love it, and they get dressed up, and the guys wear their suits, and the young ladies wear their gowns, and so it's just things like that we do for them. But people have to help us with all those things.
Yeah.
The food, the gowns. There's monies that we don't get, for all the needs that they have. Interesting thing is, Illinois ranks last in funding for people with disabilities. We've been very lucky in the last several years. We've gotten some additional dollars from the state, and we're very thankful for that. And all our elected officials have been part of that. But for the longest time, Illinois ranks last in funding for people with disabilities. New York gives the families or organizations like Valor 3 times what we get, and that's important. So we don't always cover all our costs. So a lot of the fundraising we do is to cover those gaps.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think one of the things that I admire the most about you is how heart-led you are. And that I know that you and I were talking on the phone the other day, and I was like, oh my God, I'm in the hospital with my mom, and you shared a lot about your personal experience and your family. And I think that one of the things that's important, or, like we call ourselves, even though you're a little older than me, we're still the sandwich generation, right? We're taking care of the generations ahead of us and the generations behind us. And I think that that's something very grounded in the Latin core community, right? Of like taking care of others. What I know you said you got to El Valor because you were thinking about your grandmother and she had a child with disabilities. What kept you there for 43 years?
I guess it was just my experiences with my grandmother. That the suffering that she went through. I was her favorite, and I've got a lot of, brothers and sisters.
I was my
and
grandparents'
cousins.
favorite too, but my cousins
Everybody
listen to the
denies that.
show and they're gonna get mad.
But I was very close to her, and we were always together. And so she taught me a lot. And she was very smart. And she went to the 6th grade, which she was born in 1900, the year 1900. And so 6th grade education was a lot.
Right.
And her father had a big rancho, and kind of like in Mexico and Texas. They don't know exactly where, what the boundaries were. But so she had the opportunity for an education, but she ended up marrying somebody without an education, which was my grandfather. And he worked in the mills in South Chicago, as a matter of fact. They came in like in 1914, 1915. So we've been in Chicago for a long time. But she taught me a lot, and she taught me about, compassion and helping others. And, and it was just a special relationship that I had with her. And I knew that, and then the experience with my brother getting beat up, and if I didn't defend him, nobody would defend him. And I always say that he's the one who had a huge effect on me, because I couldn't stand to see him getting beat up. So I'd defend him, and then that just carried. I was going to defend individuals who couldn't defend themselves. And so our community for a long time, didn't have a voice in Chicago, and people always treated us like we all just came last night, and in the way that, we were somehow, not, we don't belong here, and that always bothered me, because if you know your history, we belong here.
Yeah, we've been
before
here a
everybody
long
else.
time.
And so it's just things like that kind of influenced me. And then what happened to me, or what happened to family members who went through the same kinds of things, and then it's generation after generation, what happened to my own kids, and all of them went through the same things in their schools that they went through. It just never stopped. And then what happened to me in corporate America. It
Right.
happened to my wife in corporate America. It happened to I have a brother, who's things happened to him in his corporation. Somehow we were never good enough. It didn't matter what education we had, what experiences we had. There was always a way to work around us,
Right.
and that goes on today. So if anybody thinks that we've made it, we haven't. We haven't.
You've gotten better, though.
And
Yeah.
it's well, we got to keep up with. I believe we have to keep fighting for our kids and our grandkids.
I agree.
Because I hear it constantly. I still hear from folks that they're passed over for promotions. This happens. I know a young lady who's she served her country. She served in combat. She's got all this education. She's got all this experience. And it was someone I was mentoring, and she couldn't get promotions. She started her own company, and she's doing very well. But
Yeah.
that happens.
Yeah, we
It's
get-
still
we
happening
make
every day.
It's still happening.
And we have to be able to navigate through that system. Sometimes you have a champion in the systems, but they're far and few between. So you got to be your own champion, and hopefully I can influence people to be their champion.
Right. And also be the champion for the people behind us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the people who are coming up. And I think that's really important. And I hate that your son had the same experience that I had, that you had, right? As we're graduating high school, it's like, here's your path. Like, it's very, you're going to go to these, here are your options.
Yeah.
And I do think that as we get broader, or as we go to more schools and things like that, I love seeing, I don't even know what are those called, the stoles? Are they stoles they wear for graduation? And they've got the sarape print or the Puerto Rican flag, and I'm just like, yes. I'm like, we need to see those everywhere to see like
Yes.
our next generation coming up. And I stress that a lot with my kids. I was like, when I was graduating high school, my parents would have been fine if I just worked downtown,
Mhm.
right? That would have been the dream. Go get a job where you're not in a factory. Now I'm like, okay, I want my kids, I tell them, it's not negotiable. You got to either go learn a trade or go to college. I really need a plumber and an electrician or someone else over here.
Very much so. Yeah, it's funny because when I told my dad, what the counselor told me is that he'd get me a good job in the steel mills. It was funny because if I didn't get good grades, we'd get beatings. We'd be in trouble. I shouldn't say beatings, but we got punished for not getting good
Yeah.
grades. And then at the end it didn't matter because he said, "Those are great jobs in the mill. You'll never you'll always have food on the table. Let them put you in the mill, or if not, your uncle can get you in the mill." I said, "Yeah, all my uncles can get me in the mill."
Yeah, they're all there.
So and it was a wonderful job, and it provided great opportunities for our community and raising their kids and sending their kids to school and stuff.
100%,
But
yeah.
I didn't want to be in the steel mills.
You want to
No.
hear something funny? My parents met at a factory, and my grandfather worked at that factory. The majority of my uncles, like my dad's brothers, all worked at that factory. My mom and her sisters all worked at that factory. And I was hired, I had done an internship there in like their marketing department, and then I got hired on to do like business development, and I was laid off in 6 months. And I remember, when they laid me off, they're like, hey, we really don't have like a need for this position. I was like, oh, I agree. And so, I signed like my non-compete, and I was like, yeah, but what I didn't know is they had also taken my mom to a meeting to tell her that this was happening to me because of the emotional, because we all worked there.
Yeah.
And my mom worked there for 38 years, never looked for another job, never anything. She was like, oh, aquí, it was a great job, and it provided, and we, like most of her friends are the people she worked with there. And I think it served its purpose when we got here, right? Like to come here, find the good job, a stable job. But now, similar to your career, if we're not finding those promotions or that advancement opportunity, we have to go find them or make our way, maybe not have to make your own company like the young lady who served in the military. Like, that's unfortunate that she got passed up, that she got so frustrated and was like, I'm going to do my
believe-
own thing. But
Mhm.
kudos for her,
Right.
to her, for being like, me voy, and I'll just do my own thing.
Yeah, and but the sad part about it, it still happens to people every day because I hear those stories every day. And it's just, to your experiences, my grandfather worked at Wisconsin Steel, in his day, and this is in the 20s and 30s, and my uncles worked at Wisconsin Steel. So he worked Wisconsin Steel. I had uncles that worked Wisconsin Steel. My uncles worked at U.S. Steel. Other uncles worked at U.S. Steel and Republic Steel. And I worked at U.S. Steel. My brother worked at Republic Steel. So it was a generational thing. And people said, you should be satisfied with that. And the question is why?
Right.
We have dreams, and we need to foster the dreams of our children and our grandchildren. And more of us have to take that role. And we have to be vigilant of what's going on to individuals in our community, because again, it still happens. And I will tell you, because of the position that I'm in, the positions that I've had, people call me all the time about issues that they're having,
Yeah.
and ask for advice. And I'm always happy to share whatever I can with individuals, because it's who I am, and I think we all owe that response. We need to look back as well as look forward.
Yeah.
And we gotta, and it's not just within our family, it's beyond our family. It is our greater community, our greater family. So that's kind of like my philosophy, and that's really why I do the things that I do.
I love that. My dad and my uncle, whenever they would see someone, and they'd be like, oh, ese parece que acaba de llegar. They would take him out to eat and be like, do you have someone to call? Like, where can we get you? And they would always say, like, I remember what that felt like. And I think as we think back to our experiences and remembering how it felt like, it is our job to make sure that other people don't feel like that. And if we can make it just a little easier or a little, smoother for the next person, like, it is our responsibility.
Yeah, and it's not going to change unless we change it.
Right.
Nobody's going to give us anything. We have to fight for everything we get, and it's just like it's like women's rights, and someone has to be their champion. Someone has to
Right.
open those doors. Well, we can't be left behind. That's and from my perspective, I think a lot of the groups have made some progress, but I think we're still lagging behind. And if you look at boards of directors across the Americas, we don't have our percentage
We're very
especially
underrepresented. Yeah.
women and well, men and women, but we're just not there. And why in this day and age we've got tons and tons of qualified Latinos and Latinas who could fill those positions. And again, you look at the C-suite. We're not there. There's very few of
Not
us.
yet.
But
we're
why?
coming. Yeah.
And we go, our kids and many of us have gone to the best schools, and have had the same, the experiences and more experiences, because we look forward and we look backwards and we know our history. And that's one thing that I think is really important. We need to know our history.
Yes.
And we're not here. We're not here, with our hands out. We've been here working, since since the very beginnings. And if we really know our history, we're part of not just a part of the Americas, but we're part of the United States. So, and I think that it's one of the things that I felt my whole life is we didn't belong, and I still get that someday, like but it's because people don't understand the history of America,
Right.
And that's still very prevalent, Anyway, so it's just something that I truly believe in. But I think education and knowing who we are, what our history is, what our grandparents are heroes. I mean, I just can't imagine. I look at my brother getting beat up every day, but what did my parents go through?
Right.
And what did my grandparents go through?
Yeah. They came here first. I mean, imagine moving right now to a country where you don't know the language or the systems or the currency or anything. There's no internet to look it up. And they just gotta go through it.
With the attitude that you don't belong here, you don't deserve this, and that's the thing that I grew up with.
Yeah.
I told this story about I worked at a grocery store, and it's a big grocery store, a big chain, and I was a Chicago police person who was kind of like a security guard, and we got along really well. He was not Hispanic, and I was 16 years old, 17 years old. And we got to be good friends. And then one day he wasn't talking to me. And, I went up to the front office and I said, what happened? This guy seems like he's really mad at me. And he said, Ray, it's the oddest thing. And I said, what was it? And he said, he thought you were, he didn't know you were Latino or Mexican or Spanish or whatever. And I said, what does that have to do with it? And he says, well, when I told him your name was Gonzalez, he was shocked. And he said, he can't be. And he got upset that he didn't know that I was Latino or Mexican. And but he never talked to me after that.
That's horrible.
Yeah. It's those kinds of things that I remember clearly, and that my junior year when I went to the counselor and said, you people don't go to college. I'll never forget that, and I'll never forget that some kid said that to my son, 30 years later, he's in his 30s now. So, that wasn't that long ago.
No, it wasn't that long ago.
But it happens, and you got to be vigilant. And like I said, I went to school, and they still know who I am. But it just, and I would have never thought that would happen to one of my kids.
Or in this day and age.
Exactly.
Right.
And they were straight A students in a Catholic school at a high school, and they were in all kinds of activities. My daughter was a vice president of the city of the school council and things like that. But that's how they were treated, And you say, God, how does that happen? And my wife was in a corporate job, and she got a promotion, and her new boss said, I didn't want you. I wanted a man here. You're a woman. You shouldn't be in this job.
What?
Those are things that our family experienced, and people say, oh, you guys had it easy. No, none of us have it easy.
We never felt like we belonged.
Throws open the door. And that's why, if in the position that I'm in, I'm going to do everything I can to help whoever I can. It's our responsibility, and that's what I love about Valor is with our little ones from birth to 5, when they leave Valor, they can read, they can write, they know their math, they know 2 languages, they understand what a science project is. And I've heard the parents tell me over and over again, when they go to first grade, or kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third, they're always the smartest kids in the room because they had that base from Valor, and we get that all the time. And so it's like that we get them ready for success at a very early age, and so success.
Well, that's when you build the self-esteem.
Success
when you're
builds
0 to 5.
Yeah, it builds success, and so their own expectations is I'm going to be the smartest kid in the room, and so that's what's so great about what we do. We instill in our children you can do anything, and we have these themes we have smart classrooms, and every child has an iPad, and we have computers and smart boards and things like that. But they're theme-based, and it was purposeful. So it's outer space, it's the ocean, it's the forest, it's oceanography and forestry. And so we have the uniforms. We have an astronaut on the wall. And I walked into the classroom, and a young lady, a little girl, she was about 4 years old, and she says, I'm the astronaut today.
Oh.
And she's with 3 little boys, and they said, no, we want to be the astronaut. She says, no, I'm going to be the astronaut.
That's my turn.
And I'm thinking to myself, how many little girls in the Latino community say, I'm going to be an astronaut?
Right.
We never talked about us being astronauts or an oceanographer. I never even heard those
Yeah,
words
me
until I was
either,
in
yeah.
college or something. Nobody ever, no one ever encouraged me to be an astronaut or.
Well, yeah, our dreams weren't as big because we didn't know how to dream like that.
And our parents didn't know because they
Right.
were never given those opportunities. So that's what we do at Valor, and that's what all of us, in our community should encourage our kids. We should have those conversations with, and that's what I always tell the parents. You need to have those conversations with open up the world and let them know they can be anything they want. But it all starts with a great education and maintaining that through, and that's the mission of Valor. In addition to the fact that we're champions for our families with individuals with disabilities, and that's my first love, really, because of my grandmother. And that's another great thing about our community is the strong bonds from our families from generation to generation.
Yes.
I think we're lucky, because of who we are and what the traditions and the strong family values that we have.
That we bring, that are just instilled in us. I agree.
And so Valor is my family, and so we're all involved
43
with it.
years
Yeah,
in?
yeah, 43 years in.
Well, Ray, thank you.
Well,
Thank you for being here. I love the story. I love your passion for family. And, the one thing I think is something that you've always had is being that advocate for others and even for yourself, which sometimes, we are better advocates for others than for ourselves. But I think that you are an exemplary role model of
Thank you.
doing that.
Thank you.
So we will be putting on the information, an Amazon wish list to send calcetines to the babies of El Valor from 0 to 5 years old. So we will put that, and we'll get your address to make sure they get delivered to the right place so that we can keep their little feet warm in the winter especially. So look for that. And then Ray, thank you for what you do.
Well, thank you for having me today.
So, all right, we'll see you next time on Corporate Cafecito. Bye.